History's greatest conquerors didn't just have better weapons. They had a physiological advantage, one that allowed them to breathe, literally breathe through the unthinkable. And I'm not talking about a wellness trend, not a meditation app, not a journaling prompt. I'm talking about a specific, measurable, neurologically documented technique used by elite vanguard units across history that allowed ordinary men to walk into extraordinary chaos and come out the other side clear, focused, and completely in command of themselves. Here's what nobody is telling you in 2026. That same protocol is the single most relevant survival tool you are not currently using. Because the chaos those warriors faced, the screaming, the unpredictability, the senses overwhelmed, the brain completely on fire, that is your Tuesday morning. That is your inbox at 7 a.m. That is the market alert on your phone. That is the AI news cycle that hasn't stopped since you opened your eyes. The body does not distinguish between a battlefield and a boardroom. It just responds. And if you don't know how to control that response, you lose every single time. So today, I'm giving you the full protocol, the warrior code, the ancient mechanism that resets your nervous system in under 60 seconds, and the precise way to deploy it against the specific pressures of this year. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you will never respond to stress the same way again. We take the breath so we can grow the life. Let's begin. The fragility of the 2026 digital landscape. Let me tell you what is actually happening to your body right now, not theoretically, chemically. Every notification ping your phone generates activates a small but measurable threat response in your amygdala, the brain's ancient alarm system. Your cortisol ticks up. Your heart rate micro-elevates. Your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for rational decision-making, quietly begins to lose bandwidth. Now, multiply that by the average 96 smartphone interactions per day entering 2026. 96 times a day, your body is running the same physiological program it was designed to run when a predator appeared in the grass 10,000 years ago. Your biology has not updated. The threats have. And here is what makes 2026 categorically different from any previous high-stress period in modern history. It is not just the volume, it's the velocity and the ambiguity. AI-generated content has fractured our ability to determine what is real. Economic models are shifting faster than institutions can adapt. Workplace automation is threatening not just jobs, it's threatening identity. And the 24/7 global news cycle doesn't offer resolution anymore. It offers perpetual escalation. The result? A generation of high-functioning, highly capable people running on chronically dysregulated nervous systems and calling it life. I want to be honest with you for a second. 2 years ago, I was that person. I had the credentials, the practice, the frameworks. I knew the science, and I was still waking up at 3 a.m. with my heart hammering over nothing, still walking into conversations I should have led with confidence and feeling the floor drop out under my feet. Because knowing about stress and knowing how to move through it in real time are two entirely different things. That gap is what today is about. Because here is the brutal truth most people aren't willing to say out loud. Standard relaxation techniques, the deep breath your therapist recommends, the 5-minute app, the journaling prompt, those tools are designed for moderate, recoverable stress. They are excellent tools for excellent conditions. You are not living in moderate conditions. You are living in a world where the nature of the threat changes daily, where your biology is fighting a war against stimuli it was never built to process. You don't need a relaxation technique. You need a reset protocol. And that is exactly what the warrior tradition figured out long before neuroscience had the language to explain it. In a moment, I'm going to show you the exact lineage of where this technique came from and why the most battle-tested humans in history arrived at the same answer independently. But the historical proof matters, so stay with me through this. The warrior philosophy of controlled oxygen. Let me take you back.
Not to ancient Greece in the romantic sandal and toga sense. I mean to the functional, brutal reality of what elite infantry units actually did before battle. Historians, and more recently military physiologists, have documented that the most effective ancient combat units had something beyond superior training. They had a structured pre-engagement ritual centered almost entirely on controlled breathing. The Spartans drilled it. Japanese samurai codified it into what we now call kokyu, the mastery of breath as the foundation of combat presence. Roman vanguard units trained it into muscle memory alongside sword technique. Indigenous warrior cultures across 3 continents independently arrived at the same mechanism. Why? Because anyone who has ever been in true high-stakes confrontation, whether it's a physical fight, a financial crisis, or standing in front of a board that holds your entire career in its hands, knows the same terrifying sensation. Your mind goes white. Time distorts, your hands shake, your voice catches, your chest locks, and every intelligent thought you've ever had seems to vanish behind a wall of pure adrenaline. That is your sympathetic nervous system doing exactly what it was designed to do: prepare for physical survival. The problem is that most modern threats don't require physical survival. They require cognitive performance at the exact moment your brain is trying to shut cognition down. The warriors understood this instinctively. They didn't have fMRI scans, but they had something more valuable: centuries of field testing. They discovered that controlling the breath, specifically the manipulation of the inhale-hold-exhale ratio, was the master switch, not the result of calm, the cause of it. This is the foundational shift I need you to carry forward. Most people believe calmness is something that happens to them when conditions improve. The warrior tradition, and now neuroscience, tells us that calmness is something you actively generate through a physiological mechanism you control directly. The breath is not passive. It is the most powerful voluntary intervention you have access to, and most of us are using it at about 3% of its capacity. Now, I'm going to break down the exact 3-phase protocol, the specific cadence, the science behind each beat, and the physical anchor technique that makes it work even when the pressure is at its peak. This is the part people screenshot. Stay with me. Pattern interrupt. Hold on. Before I give you the exact protocol, I want you to feel something for a second. Think about the last time stress actually won, the last time your brain went offline in a moment that mattered, the decision you second-guessed, the conversation that went sideways, the night you couldn't sleep. Got it? That is the before. What I'm about to give you is the after.
Mechanics of the pressure valve protocol. Here is the actual mechanism. The science first, because understanding why it works is what separates someone who does this once and forgets it from someone who makes it a permanent operating system. Your autonomic nervous system has 2 primary modes: sympathetic, fight or flight, cortisol, adrenaline, elevated heart rate, tunnel vision, cognitive narrowing; parasympathetic, rest and regulate, clear thinking, broad perception, creative problem-solving, rational decision-making. The key interface between those 2 systems is the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve is directly, immediately responsive to one thing above all others: the exhale. Specifically, a prolonged exhale activates parasympathetic dominance. This is documented, measurable. Your heart rate variability changes within seconds of an extended exhale. Your cortisol begins to clear. Your prefrontal cortex, that rational command center, comes back online. Now add the second variable, CO2 tolerance. Most people have a very low threshold for carbon dioxide buildup in the blood. The moment CO2 rises even slightly, panic signals fire. This is why people hyperventilate under stress. They're flushing CO2 as fast as possible, which paradoxically makes the anxiety worse.
Elite performers, free divers, special operations personnel, high-performance surgeons have systematically trained their CO2 tolerance upward. They can sit in discomfort longer without the panic response firing. They remain composed in situations that would break someone with an untrained nervous system. The protocol I'm about to give you builds both responses simultaneously. The three-phase warrior breath. Phase 1, the tactical inhale. 4 counts, through the nose, deep and diaphragmatic, not chest breathing, belly breathing. Feel your lower abdomen expand before your chest rises. This activates the diaphragm fully and begins drawing maximum oxygen volume. 4 counts, slow, deliberate, like you own the next 4 seconds regardless of what is happening around you. Phase 2, the hold. 7 counts, full hold at the top of the inhale. This is where the CO2 tolerance work happens. This is also where most people get uncomfortable, and that discomfort is the training itself. You are teaching your nervous system that elevated CO2 is not an emergency, that you can be under pressure and remain in command. You are expanding your window of tolerance. 7 counts. Hold. Do not tighten your throat. Let the pressure exist without reacting to it. Phase 3, the controlled release. 8 counts out through the mouth. Slow, controlled. Think of it as releasing pressure through a valve you control, not a burst pipe, but a deliberate, metered release. This 8-count exhale is your direct activation of the vagus nerve. This is where your heart rate decelerates, where cortisol clears, where your mind re-widens. 4 in, 7 hold, 8 out. 3 rounds of that. We're talking 90 seconds total, and your physiological state is measurably different. Now, there is one additional element that the warrior tradition added, and one that most modern breath coaches miss entirely: the anchor point. Before beginning the breath cycle, identify one physical sensation: the weight of your feet on the floor, the pressure of your back against a chair, the temperature of the air on the back of your hands. Lock conscious attention onto that sensation. This physical anchor prevents the prefrontal cortex from being completely hijacked by the threat narrative running in the background. You are giving your rational brain a foothold to maintain while the breath protocol does its work. The combination, anchor plus breath cycle, is dramatically more effective than the breath alone. That is the pressure valve protocol. Simple enough to do anywhere. Powerful enough to change your neurological state in under 2 minutes. But knowing the protocol is one thing. Knowing when and exactly how to deploy it inside a 2026 lifestyle, that is the difference between a technique you tried once and a competitive advantage you use daily. Let me map this for you specifically. Trigger 1, deepfake fatigue. This is something that did not exist 5 years ago, and now is a genuine neurological burden. The chronic low-grade anxiety of not being sure whether what you're consuming is real, whether that's a news clip, a voice message, an image of a public figure, generates a sustained stress response that most people aren't even consciously attributing to a specific cause. They just feel vaguely uneasy, vaguely overwhelmed. When you catch yourself in that state, scrolling, consuming, unsure what to believe, that's your cue. Stop. Anchor. 3 rounds of 4, 7, 8. You're not solving the information crisis. You're removing yourself from the physiological state that makes you most vulnerable to it. Trigger 2, automated workplace shifts. The anxiety around AI and automation is not irrational. It is a legitimate response to a genuinely uncertain landscape. But anxiety does not help you navigate that landscape. Clarity does. And you cannot access clarity from inside a cortisol spike. Before any high-stakes professional conversation, presentation, or decision this year, run the protocol. 3 rounds. Anchor, then enter the room. The invisible protocol, deploying in public. Here is something that separates people who actually use this from people who only theorize about it. You can execute this protocol without anyone knowing. Sit normally, plant your feet, place your hands in your lap. Breathe through your nose, the count is internal. The 7-count hold at the top looks nothing from the outside. The 8-count exhale through slightly parted lips looks like a quiet breath. You can run this in a meeting, in a waiting room, in a conversation that is going sideways. Nobody will know. But you will know, because you will be the only person in that room operating from a regulated nervous system while everyone else is reactive. That is not a small advantage. That is a decisive one. Morning and evening bookends. The protocol becomes most powerful when it frames your entire day, not just as a crisis response. Morning bookend, before you touch your phone, before you check messages, before the 2026 information cycle gets its first foothold on your nervous system. 3 rounds, 4, 7, 8 with the anchor. You are setting your neurological baseline before the world gets a vote. Evening bookend, the last thing before sleep. 3 rounds, anchor. This is your signal to your nervous system that the day's threat profile is closed, that cortisol can fully clear, that your body can enter the deep recovery sleep it needs to sustain this performance. These 2 bookends alone, morning and evening, will shift the quality of your baseline faster than almost any other single practice you could introduce. And here's what happens when you sustain that baseline consistently. This is the part of the conversation most people never reach.
The competitive dimension. Stay with me, because this is where everything compounds. The competitive edge of the calm mind. Let me leave you with a frame I think about constantly, and one I believe will become one of the defining insights of this decade. In a world of reactive people, composure is currency, not metaphorically, literally, in economic terms, in social capital terms, in leadership terms. When every person in your organization, your industry, your network is operating from a dysregulated baseline, jumping from panic to panic, reactive to the news cycle, their decision-making compromised by chronic cortisol load, the person who can maintain a regulated nervous system under genuine pressure becomes extraordinary. Not because they're smarter, not because they work harder, because they can think when others cannot. I'll tell you exactly when I felt this for the first time. I was in a conversation, high stakes, high money, high noise, that should have wrecked me. The kind of situation I would have walked out of 2 years ago, with my hands shaking and my mind running catastrophe scenarios for the next 3 days. Instead, I ran 3 rounds of this protocol in the 90 seconds before I walked into the room, anchored to the floor. And I sat in that conversation feeling something I can only describe as solid. Like the pressure was real, but I wasn't inside it. I was watching it clearly from a place it couldn't reach. That's the shift, and it starts in the body before it ever reaches the mind. The warrior advantage was never about being fearless. The warriors who mastered the breath were not unafraid. They were afraid and composed simultaneously. They could feel the pressure and choose their response anyway. That is a trainable skill, and you are training it right now. And here's what that composure unlocks on the other side: energy reclamation. A person running on chronic stress is burning enormous metabolic and cognitive resources simply maintaining baseline function. The physiological cost of sustained cortisol elevation is comparable over time to running a low-grade fever every single day. You are spending massive internal resources just staying upright. Every time you run the protocol and interrupt that cycle, you reclaim energy that was being lost to noise. Slowly, consistently, that surplus compounds. You think clearly, you sleep deeply, your creative capacity expands, your decision quality improves. You move from surviving the year to building inside it.
Sovereignty in a destabilized world does not come from the right news source. It does not come from the right investment strategy. It does not come from predicting what the next disruption will be. It comes from this, from the irreducible fact that you control one thing with complete authority at every moment of your life. No algorithm can take it, no economic shift can remove it, no deepfake can corrupt it. You control the breath. And if you control the breath, you control the response. If you control the response, you control the outcome. If you control the outcome, you are sovereign. That is not ancient wisdom dressed up in modern language. That is the operating system underneath everything. We take the breath so we can grow the life. And subscribe. Let me make sure you leave here with everything you need. The protocol. 4 counts in through the nose, 7 counts hold, 8 counts out through the mouth. Anchor on one physical sensation before you begin. 3 rounds, 90 seconds. Deploy it in the morning before you touch your phone, in the evening before you sleep, and at every 2026 pressure point in between. That is it. That is the warrior code, distilled, tested across centuries, and handed to you completely free. But if you want to go further, if you want the full nervous system optimization sequence that builds directly on top of this protocol, including the specific breathing architecture for peak performance states rather than just recovery, that is the next video. And I promise you, it opens a door this one only knocked on. It's linked right above me. And if something shifted for you today, if you felt something change in how you understand what's possible when you take your physiology as seriously as your strategy, share this, not because an algorithm cares, because someone in your life is drowning in 2026 and doesn't know there's a door out. Give them the door. I'm Dr. Silas Kincaid. Until next time, take the breath, grow the life.